Recently, I was listening to an interview with Olympic silver medalist and New York marathon winner Shalane Flanagan. Now, I would like to say that Shalane and I are running buddies. But really, I lined up about 10 feet behind her on the starting line of San Antonio's Rock and Roll Marathon a number of years ago. The starting gun went off and she was gone. In the course of this interview, she described a low point in her career, no, not running with me, but when she suffered an injury while running on snow and ice. Her father had reprimanded her, saying, "Never, Shalane, never take a Ferrari off-road." As challenging as her return to elite competition after injury must have been, it was another challenge she described that caught my attention. Flanagan and her husband had recently become foster parents to twin teenage girls from Kenya. The twins were already in their senior year in high school, and Flanagan, who had never had children, was suddenly thrust into the role of being a parent to two nearly there, but not yet adults. She described the time when the girls were most talkative as windshield time. That is, the time they had together during the drive between home and school, or whatever other activities parents chauffeur. Does that sound familiar, parents of teenagers? Whether it's because they're strapped into a confined space for a set amount of time, or because the lack of eye contact feels less intimidating, she says, windshield time is a space where they can really open up and share what's going on in their lives. During my days as a youth minister, I can remember experiencing something similar, finding myself astounded at what the students would talk about in the back of the church van, as if they forgot that a set of adult ears were listening a few feet away in the driver's seat. "You all do know that I can hear you," I would remind them. Well, perhaps you might recall a journey, a long hike, or an epic road trip where good friends became best friends. And hours of unhurried conversation bring about a newfound intimacy. The long haul is often made easier with a companion to pass the miles. And windshield time is just the place for such conversations. Our gospel reading this morning starts with a road trip to a village called Emmaus, some 7 miles from Jerusalem. The walk would have taken between 2 to 3 hours. "What is it that you are discussing with each other?" our inquisitive stranger asks Cleopas and his companion as they travel along the way. "Isn't it obvious?" they might have thought to themselves before responding. "What do you mean, what are we talking about?" "We're talking about what everybody is talking about." "What things?" the stranger persists. Now, surely Jesus had to have known what these two grief-stricken disciples were discussing. But it's as if he wanted to hear it from their own lips. "What is it that has you looking so sad?" And then something very important happens. Then Jesus listens. Their miraculous experience of the resurrection begins with listening. Jesus does not instantly reveal himself. He does not get in their face and tell them, "Hey guys, don't be sad, I'm here." No, amid their sadness and hopelessness, Jesus first listens. True companionship always begins with listening. But still, they could not recognize who it was that was walking with them. Could it have been their grief that blinded them? Was it their confusion or self-absorption that clouded their vision? Did they avoid looking at the stranger in the eye out of fear of what uncertainties their eyes might betray? After listening to their pain and grief, after seeing their sadness, the stranger does a remarkable thing. He risks telling them the truth. He tells them the truth, and at first glance, the truth doesn't always sound so nice, does it? Oh, how foolish and slow of heart to believe, he says. At least one commentator noted, however, that this expression might be better understood as a type of banter, or perhaps even a term of endearment, not unlike, "You knuckleheads," or "Hey, geniuses." I don't know about you, but I often find that it is those who know me best who are best able to call me on my own stuff. Those people God places in our lives who hold us accountable to what we know to be true, even and especially when we are not acting like it. So not only does companionship begin with listening, true companionship must also risk telling the truth. Taking a closer look, this narrative hinges on something that has always intrigued me. So often the focus of this story is on the moment when the disciples' eyes are opened and Jesus is made known to them in the breaking of the bread. That is undoubtedly a compelling scene, but there is a crucial moment that precedes this, on which the whole story hinges. Before the breaking of the bread, still unrecognized by the disciples, the stranger walks on, as if he were going ahead. He was about to leave, unnoticed, unrecognized, uninvited. Jesus does not impose himself on them, nor is faith forced upon us without our participation. So where was he going? What might have happened to Cleopas and his companion had they not invited this stranger to stay on? But they used the very same word that Jesus had used as he shared with them in the upper room at his Last Supper. They say, "Abide. Abide with us." What would have come of them if they had not practiced this small gesture of hospitality, even and especially in the midst of their confusion and grief? Surely, during their years spent with Jesus, these disciples must have seen him invite countless strangers to break bread together. He ate with all sorts and conditions of people: tax collectors, sinners, those who were agents of empire, as well as those who were oppressed by that very system. It was one of the most controversial parts of Jesus' ministry, who he ate with. Breaking bread with Jesus did not mean that you were somehow more special than others or more deserving of the honor. Breaking bread with Jesus was an invitation to friendship and fidelity in this new way of being that broke down barriers, an entry into the kingdom of heaven. So notice the transformation that occurs for our two travelers. Before they recognize Jesus, these two grieving disciples experience a small moment of resurrection before they even realize who it is that they are talking to. They are displaying something of their faith, even in the midst of their confusion. They insist that the stranger abide with them. They practice hospitality. A radical welcome. And in a time when we are told it is best to tend to our own and not trust those who are different from us, what a remarkable thing to invite the stranger to stay. And the word here translated stranger is the very same word used for sojourner, alien, or dare we say, immigrant. A friend of mine was sharing with me this past week one of the most radically hospitable times he has ever seen in this city of Birmingham was just a few years ago during the snowpocalypse, Snowmageddon, whatever it was called. We had our own Snowmageddon in San Antonio, but I remember seeing the national news here. When people opened their 4x4 car doors and their front doors to give people hot chocolate or coffee and check to see if they were safe, if they were warm, it was one of the most radical acts of hospitality he had ever seen in this entire city. In a time when inflation and scarcity seem to be those economic buzzwords of the day, our tendency can sometimes be to circle the wagons and merely tend to our own self-preservation. But the road to Emmaus suggests that the only way to move beyond such scarcity and fear is to begin to break down the barriers between who we might consider us and them, to make connections where strangers become companions. And it is in such simple practices as a long walk, or a Bible study, a shared meal, that the disciples' eyes are open to the very presence of the resurrected Christ. There is so much for us to learn on this road to Emmaus. That true companionship starts with listening. True companionship also involves risking the truth. And finally, that true companionship is irresistibly transformative. Just as Jesus was made known in the breaking of the bread, so may we be made known, his disciples, by our acts of true companionship. As the beautiful hymn that we just sang says it so beautifully. Come, risen Lord, and deign to be our guest. Nay, let us be thy guest, the feast is thine. Thyself at thine own board make manifest in thine own sacrament of bread and wine.